do you create a graceful path back to individual contributor in case things don't work out for either performance issues or, basically the person saying, no, no thanks. I just want to go back to doing my own thing.
Yeah, and that has happened a few
Yeah.
times. And yeah, there's a just a very graceful path back. It works really well because we do have this like player coach role.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
the percentage that you spend, playing or coaching, it kind of changes again. It
Yeah. For
depends
sure.
based on the needs. And so there is an easy path to still move up to that next level and be an individual contributor. And essentially, you're just doing more technical leadership without the people leadership. And so
Yeah.
that has happened before, and that's worked out well. And it was good to know, like, for that person to be sure they were pretty sure they weren't interested, but they wanted to try it out, and they're like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely prefer individual contribution," and it was good for us to be able to provide that and for us to know that, like, we wouldn't be able to get that out of this person if
Yeah.
we, ever need more managers.
Welcome to the new episode of Lead for Performance. I am thrilled today to welcome Ivan Herndon, who's a VP of Engineering at Branch Insurance. Ivan, welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so, glad to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yes, awesome. Me too. I'm excited for this conversation. So let's just dive in. You're a VP, head of engineering branch,
Yeah.
sorry. You're building very cool disruptive technology in a very traditional industry. So how does that, big mission and transformation influence how you think about building your engineering team to deliver?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that think about building engineering teams
Hmm.
in maybe a non-traditional way. I think it starts back from how I got into tech. I didn't go through like a computer science program or anything like that. I
Hmm.
got into tech through an apprenticeship program. And
Okay.
so if you think about, what you're saying about branch is similar to kind of my path and how I got into tech. It's this kind of industry that's, not regulated, but, people get in a certain way.
Hmm.
And, I was able to break in a different way. And I found that my experience in other fields and other professions seemed to be very useful in
Hmm.
engineering. And so I took that when I'm building teams as well, and so it's not that we look for, people that have to have a CS degree or anything like that.
Yeah.
We do like people who have learned from boot camps. We also did
Mm.
a version like a V1 or maybe even a V0 of a boot camp program ourselves,
Oh,
where we
cool.
had apprenticeships and internships that came out of that. And there are some people on the team that came through that program. And so I'm looking more for people who are a culture fit that, of course, they have the technical skills, but it's important that they can collaborate well, that they can communicate well and effectively with a remote team, because not everybody's used to that.
Yeah.
And it's something that you can definitely learn, but there are people who tend to want to communicate face to face and they don't work well communicating asynchronously. And so those are probably some of the things that I look for outside of the, yes, I want you to know the tech stack and know how to
Great.
code and build things.
Great. That's great. I love that perspective. And I've also come to appreciate absolutely the different paths people take and the knowledge and wisdom that comes with that. And it's not just about like the code, right? ABCs of coding.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So as you've grown significantly in the past, like almost 10 years, I guess, and raised, hundreds of millions dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, which is a dream for any startup. How have you seen some of the leadership challenges emerging as the company has grown over time? And because that's also like I have a little bit of a thing I like to pick at, because I think sometimes leadership and development and performance can work with at a certain size, all the traditional approaches work, but then as scale, like the cracks are growing as we scale. So I just want to get your perspective, since you get the privilege of being in a growth company.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think that you have to be able to adapt like your processes and leadership style to fit the size of the team. And that means even like your team structure
Mm.
also. So, I think when you're looking at an engineering team that's really small, let's say you're starting off with just like one or two devs or whatever, like a super
Hmm.
small handful of devs, it's okay to have almost no processes, I think.
Right.
Everybody's like an expert in all parts of the code. They can communicate effectively
Hmm.
about it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Everything is in your brain. That's okay for a smaller team. As you begin to grow and people become more specialized, then you have to worry about
Hmm.
documentation. We can't have everything depend on one person who's a specialist in it and being able to communicate that out to the rest of the team effectively. And then, as you continue to grow, you're going to have separate teams and not
Hmm.
just one large team. And so that's where you'll have other team leaders or other managers that are managing individual dev teams, or you might have started off with just one big dev team. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of ways to do that and structure that team. I like to follow kind of the team topologies method with streamline teams, but there's other parts of the team that aren't engineers that you need for that to work well, like a PM on every team,
Hmm.
QA, design. And so there's all these things that are interconnected that you have to take account for. But I think it's important to be agile in the
Hmm.
true sense of the definition, not the philosophy, so that you can change as the company grows and as the needs grow. Because from my perspective, the whole thing is to support the business and move the
Yes.
business forward. And you can't do that when you're just focused on this has to be the one way we do this or the one structure, especially as the team and the company is changing and growing and things like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, Ivan. That's almost following like the logic of it all, right? The scale and
Yeah.
growth. And but I think, the thing almost at the end is like to come back to is what you said at the very end. The whole point is to support the business, right? I do
Right.
think sometimes that can be a little bit, there's a bit of something that's managed, right? And obviously you're a very intentional leader in that space, but that is the kind of this gap that appears that we hear about, like tech business alignment or gap, right? So because it's easy, and as a technologist myself, it's easy to get excited about what tech can do and what we can build.
Right, yeah, no, that's that's a good point. Yeah, it's very it's very easy to get focused on, like, the latest and greatest tech. I wanna try this. I
Yeah,
read an article about it,
yeah,
heard about it on a podcast. Like, we gotta switch to this new thing. And a lot of times, those really technical people wanna do those things even when it doesn't make any business sense, and it may not even make technical sense. Obviously, you don't
yeah,
wanna
yeah,
switch
totally.
all the time to like new or different tech stacks. At Branch, we have a kind
Yes.
of buy over build mentality. So if
Ah,
there's something that is out there that works that we can purchase the service of, we'll use that so we can focus on building the things that nobody else can build. And I think that's
yes.
another important aspect of it. But yeah, it comes back to like prioritization in terms of supporting the business. Are the priorities set properly, number one, but are they being communicated
Yeah,
effectively as well? And a lot of times I've seen on engineering teams, sometimes they just aren't getting the priorities handed down to them in the right way as the priorities of business, and they're working on their
yeah.
own priorities. Yeah.
Course. And there, of course, and then when you talk, and I mean, I totally agree, and I love that you brought up actually priority prioritization. But also, I know again, even it's kind of like prioritization. How does it sound to a business? How does it sound to the technical people? Right? There is always that little language gap that also appears. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Because there'll definitely be things that always feel more important to work on as an engineer than what's the highest priority item. And I
yeah,
think, as an individual engineer, like you have to balance that. But as a leader of the team, you definitely have to
yeah,
balance that, make
yeah.
sure that the right things are getting worked on.
Yeah. Yeah, for absolutely, for sure. Okay, yeah, let's go to I want to pick at something else. So as you were talking before about scaling the growth, and I loved your talking about scaling with the business, keeping alignment to the business objectives, prioritizing growing roles and structures. Inevitably, as you grow teams and exactly go from a handful of developers, you need some sort of a manager or peers, right? And then you might have multiple teams, you need some sort of management role. How do you think about that and think about those does that manager or management role come in uh, from the business side and or from the tech side itself? Like how have you seen that play out?
Yeah. I mean, my preference
Hmm.
is for sure that they come from the tech side. I
Yeah.
think unless you're at a really established company that has like all of these processes that just kind of work themselves out, then I think it would be okay to have somebody from more of the business side. So like
There,
what
yeah.
I've seen play out before is there might be somebody who's working on like the product side, which is still part of tech but not engineering, and they end
Yep,
up being
yep,
or being put in place of like engineer manager. I do think it's better, especially as you're growing and you have a smaller team, especially if you have engineers who could use that mentorship from the
yep,
business side and technically, that technical leadership works well. And there's also this kind of split, and I've seen like conversations about it is when you're a manager, should you never touch any code again
yeah,
or
yeah,
should you be able to code? I think again, feels like a scapegoat answer, but I think it depends
yeah,
on the situation, the team, the growth stage that you're at. But I think there is room for a player coach kind of management role where you are focused on the higher level technical decisions. You
yes,
probably are putting your hands on the keyboard in important situations, but most of the time you're making sure that the team is doing better and getting better and directing the team. And so that's how I think it should go, especially at the stage where we're at. But I've seen room and I've seen it work in other ways too. But
yeah.
yeah.
That's fair, but I think all the best, answers for in this on this topic and many in business really, it depends. Actually, like a lot of
Right.
the magic is in applying, the best practices or things that we heard into the environment and the people that we are actually working with. So
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
worry, I think it's a good answer to start with. It depends.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think that was important too, what you said, the environment, but also the people that you're
Yep,
working with,
yep,
because, you have to be able to personalize like some aspects of what you're doing to
mhm,
fit the team that you have. And so
yeah.
that's another
It's
important
critical,
part
right?
of it.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'd always be starting from scratch, and I mean, that's actually a bit of a nightmare when you
Yeah.
actually think about that, right? Yeah, so I would love to pick a little more at that because I also share your opinion here as well on that. When as you grow the dev team, if the team really benefits unless there's some exceptional circumstances, and of course the size is large as you talked about. And especially, sorry, I like the product manager potential link there, but I also think it's like for really strong technical leadership, it really helps that you have a technical leader in that place. Like they really understand the environment, challenge it, and can really lead the team effectively. Now, but the thing is, how do we set up that technical leader? So that's the one, and that's the crux of probably what I like is that I'm looking to dig up here with you as well. Is like it's kind of like how do we set up those technical, individual contributors to be effective leaders because it's a very different set of success criteria and it's a big change that happens. I'm sure
Yeah.
you would agree with that. And, just I would love your thoughts on that
Yeah.
switch.
I agree completely with that. Yeah, it's definitely a different set of success criteria where
Mhm.
you can't it doesn't all just rely on you, right?
Yep.
You're relying on other people. I think the way that it's worked for me and I would continue to do it this way. I like to have at some point when you're like some level of senior engineer where
Hmm.
there's this kind of fork in the road where you
Hmm.
can say, "Hey, I think I do want to do more management or I want to be strictly individual contributor."
Hmm.
I try to give people an opportunity to kinda test the waters out.
Ah.
Usually in, like, some kinda tech lead position, and so they may not, like, officially have direct reports at that moment, but I think it's good that they have a couple people that they are doing one-on-ones with, that they are mentoring more closely,
Hmm.
and that they can see essentially how does that work when you're communicating the other way, like to help other people and like bring them up. Is that something that you're
Yeah.
good at or that you enjoy doing? Because you might not be good at it, but if you enjoy it, I mean, there's definitely ways to get better at it. And then, from there, after some set amount of time, usually there's a decision made of if you want to kind of go down that right or if you want to stay
Right. Okay. Yeah.
and be a higher level IC. And so that's worked. That's
Okay.
worked for me. Just kind of
Yeah. I like that.
let you do it for real, but in a very controlled environment and see how you like it. I've seen in other places where there wasn't a choice. It's like, hey, you're the most senior person. The manager quit. you're the man, we
Right.
need somebody to be a manager. And it was, I mean, there is a choice, but it's kind of like, hey, we're really pushing you
Yeah.
to do this thing.
Voluntold. The voluntold is the term I think I've used
Yeah,
before.
yeah. Volunteer, definitely. And sometimes that works and you can get better by being thrown into the fire. And then sometimes it's not the right
Yeah.
person for the job, and it can be pretty bad. And so I think it's good to make sure that um what the company needs aligns with what the person,
Yes.
needs and desires to do, and that's where you'll have the best outcomes.
I mean, I love that. I really love that approach. Like you're giving people, first of all, choice, raising awareness, training wheels kind of roll to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then, go up from there. And again, like I like you're recognizing here that there could be a gap in skills, but are you recognizing, oh, are you interested in closing that gap? Then we'll have that conversation. If not, and that's basically what I would ask. Like if you put somebody in a team role, like a test team role, let's say, do you create a graceful path back to individual contributor in case things don't work out for either performance issues or, basically the person saying, no, no thanks. I just want to go back to doing my own thing.
Yeah, and that has happened a few
Yeah.
times. And yeah, there's just a very graceful path back. It works really well because we do have this like player coach role.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
the percentage that you spend, playing or coaching, it kind of changes again. It
Yeah. For
depends
sure.
based on the needs. And so there is an easy path to still move up to that next level and be an individual contributor. And essentially, you're just doing more technical leadership without the people leadership. And so
Yeah.
that has happened before, and that's worked out well. And it was good to know, like, for that person to be sure they were pretty sure they weren't interested, but they wanted to try it out, and they're like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely prefer individual contribution," and it was good for us to be able to provide that and for us to know that, like, we wouldn't be able to get that out of this person if
Yeah.
we, ever need more managers.
Yeah. That actually makes me think there's this kind of, actually, I like that three paths up for technical talent, right? Like you can stay purely individual contributor, right? And it sounds like you would agree. And I agree that sometimes that is the right path for an individual
Yeah.
and the company, right? Both ways. There is this like there's a management role, like that's people and technical product management. And then there's this in between where you can just technical leadership only. Let's say you're taking care of like architecture or something like that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, awesome. And then, yeah, actually, you know what? I used to always say two. And I actually, but obviously, just as we talk, I'm like three, clearly.
Yeah.
So imagine as a part of a lead, like a VP of engineering for a startup, this is kind of the opportunity you probably are enjoying as well, creating these roles and pathways in an organization. So it's really reassuring. Again, I come here from a little bit personal. I think it's
Yeah.
reassuring that you're thinking about the three pathways and that any three are actually okay. It's a matter of the fit with the person, the team, and the business.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. No, definitely. And yeah, like you said, that is part of what I enjoy about the role
Yeah,
in
yeah, cool.
in the startup for sure. And it's just taking, the experiences that I've had, things that I've seen work, things that I've seen like, hey, that doesn't really
Yeah,
work. And just trying to like build the best system of processes for the growth that we're having. And I guess I would say, yeah, I guess I I would just put it like that. I mean, the only other thing I would add to it is a lot of times when you're growing, I've seen this at another fast growing startup that I was in. Too much change too fast is
yeah,
also not good. And so what you'll see is in my opinion, when people haven't really thought through what the kind of best processes are, or even the best ways to figure out what'll work best, you get a lot of like structural reorgs and things like that in a
yeah,
short amount of time. And so I also try to prevent us from doing that. So
yeah,
even when we're at a point where I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure a different structure might work better here or some different
yeah,
processes might work. I really take the time to vet that so that we aren't
yeah.
doing one thing, going back, or again, just like on the technical side, kind of trying the best new thing. You don't want to do that on the process side either, because that'll definitely burn people and wear them out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to pull here right from the agile, methodology itself, and talks about the cost of context switching.
Yes.
That's same with organizational change, and is every time there's a real cost to it, right? You don't think there is, or we might not think there is, but obviously you're super attuned to, yeah, there is, and you're totally right. So have to be really meaningful. So they can't just be like zigzag and people's heads are spinning. That would create an environment where it would be really hard to understand your priorities, going back to what you brought up earlier, right? So
Yes, definitely.
the balance. That's where it's the art and the science and the balance of it all kind of come in. So what I also, again, I really like that, that's such, the training, I call it like almost like team lead role on kind of like training wheels kind of role, like to see test role.
Yes.
It's like, obviously you're in that, you're recognized, which is, first of all, it's a really great practical example of how this can work in real life. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Inherently in there, I would see is that you are giving time for this. So you can't expect that, like, you're like, oh, I would like to do this. Okay, now here we are getting, are you succeeding or not succeeding? There's kind of inherent time, like testing it out, identifying the gaps, discussing whether how to close them and whether to close them or not. So do you have any sense of, like, do you have any, kind of like rule of thumb that you follow with how long you give a person a chance in that role, or, opportunity in that role?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think at least 6 months is probably
Okay,
the
yeah,
right time.
great.
I feel like, for most people on their side and on my side, I have a pretty good idea in, what, 3 months, but I do think probably 6 months is where you
Yeah,
wanna land in the time that you wanna give to it at minimum.
yeah. And that's
Yeah.
really helpful, again, to give, like, that's one of the things I think everybody, the world is built for like fast results.
Right.
We have to kind of, like, I love sharing a little bit. Okay, no, we have to really give some room for this kind of transition to be successful. So what's
Yeah.
realistic, and share. Now, on the flip side of that, like, let's say you're giving this room, which is totally the healthy thing for the team and the person. Have you come to see some early signs of it maybe not working out, like both ways, right? Like either from the person or the team, and or your expectations not being met. What
Yeah.
do you look for?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the biggest signs are that, we have software that we look at that like tracks some of the metrics from the team. And so I would expect that when you're putting
Yeah.
somebody new in this role and taking them off of development, like your throughputs are going to go down some.
Hmm.
And then you expect it probably after a month or two or whatever it might be as a team for it to kick back up. And
Yeah.
that's usually because you're getting more out of the people that are being mentored or managed by this person. And
Yeah.
then that person's got a better handle on like the best ways to do it and communicate, collaborate effectively with them and lead them effectively. And so they're able to also go back and put some more into their throughput. Although I wouldn't ever expect it to go back to 100% of what it was before, right? Because we know they're split in time. And so some signs
Right.
from just the data would be you're
Okay.
not seeing anything come back up,
Yeah.
or especially if you just see it like go down the first month and go down a little bit more again after that. That usually tells us that we have a problem. But I think also just trying to like foster an environment for open communication is best when you can get that feedback from the people.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
whether it's, a person in that kind of test role, "Hey, this isn't really working out," or "I don't know how to do it," like asking questions, things like that, letting them
Yeah.
know that they have that support. And then for the people that they're, working with, if things are going well from their perspective too, then, obviously that's an indication that, hey, if they're not getting all they need from this person and we aren't able to kinda clean that up, then that
Yeah.
tells me it's not working. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's like data, which I love, but again, in context. So talking to that person and talking to their team, right? And looking at,
Yes.
and then ultimately, I'm sure business results always comes into like, ultimately, are you doing
Well,
what
yes,
we
of
need to be
course.
doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, even beyond your current experience is like, do you have you thought about what do most end companies miss when they're preparing engineers for this transition? Or what is it, what is the gap that we're looking to see if it's there or to close after, like in your from your experience?
Yeah, I would say it's gonna be the soft skills training, I think, most of
Mhm.
the time. I mean, I think you'll have some people that are better at it than others. I found, from an engineering perspective, soft skills are probably like lacking more than other fields,
Yeah.
I would
By design, I would say.
yeah, exactly, by design and
Yeah.
definitely from my experience. And I've seen that where it's like, okay, again, like the team's grown, we need another manager. You're the most senior
Yeah.
engineer, you should do it.
Yes.
And that's not the
No,
best
it
way.
makes me cringe even as you sorry, as
Yeah.
you say that, it stresses me out because I know,
Yeah.
the top brilliant engineer, a few pop in my head, I'm sure you have the same, where you're
Yes.
like, never should they be people
Right.
leaders, right?
Yeah, definitely. And like the place where I saw this happen the most is actually a company where once you became an engineer, they didn't want you to do any coding. So not only are
Right.
they not preparing you, they're also just taking their best engineer out
Out
of
of
the
the
team
game.
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, that would be, I would say, worst
Terrible.
case scenario probably. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Worst case scenario.
Terrible. Not only
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
not have a manager, but now you've lost your star
Yes.
engineer.
Yes,
But
exactly.
okay, we can agree. That's a double H payment right there. Hard
Yeah.
lesson learned on that.
Yeah.
Let's say that we're
Definitely.
trying to stop people from that and companies that were
Yes.
that path. Yeah, I
Definitely.
totally agree. So obviously, the people management is a real skill, and and some people innately have it. We can exactly you said we can build on it. I was going to ask you, to me, the other one that kind of percolates underneath is also the idea of like, connecting to bit, like just we kind of talked about business tech is different, connect to business outcomes. Now, as a leader, as a manager of some kind, you are really responsible for outcomes of your team. And, depending on the structure, connecting them to business outcomes.
Right.
And then from personal experience, I know it's almost like two different languages is how I've explained it. So I wonder, do you see that gap? And, how do you see people bridging that successfully?
Yeah, I've seen that gap. I mean, there's gonna be like how large the gap is gonna depend on where you are, but I've definitely
Yeah,
seen that gap somewhat probably everywhere I've been. I think, I've seen it handled in a way where we would have, and this was at a different company, but you had a
yeah,
product team that was separate. You had a engineer manager. They were kind of responsible for doing like the agile ceremonies, helping work get in. And then it was really up to the manager to figure out the best way to not transform, but just put those results of the team and put it in a way that the business will understand and some like report that goes out every month so the business can see. I think that works.
yeah,
It satisfies the business. I think it's better when the team can understand the impact of their work,
yeah, for sure.
kind of like as it's going through in the sprints, at the end of the sprint, in the cycles, however you're working through your backlog.
Yeah,
But it's important that they have that context, not just for, business reasons, but also those things can help technically in some of the decisions that you make instead
yes,
of just passing down like, hey, do this thing. It's important
yeah,
because it's important and you don't need the broader context. And so
yeah,
I think for me, if you can tie most or all of your work to a business outcome, like obviously that's the
yes,
best. I think
yes,
even the highly technical work of, hey, we need this refactor or we do need to switch to some other technology. There's a way that you can turn that into why that's good and important
for
for the
sure.
business. And a lot of times that's skipped, especially on the very technical work, where it's just like, hey, I'm the expert. It needs to be done.
Yeah,
Like, trust that. And so it is up to the leader to be able to
yes,
translate that, but it's also important that, that translation I think happens at a lower level. And as much as you can get your team to understand that as they're working and kind of, they're going to work on what's most important based on what's in the
yes.
backlog, but even understanding the why behind it is just really
Yes.
important. And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's like to me a critical layer, and that's because you need everybody thinking this way, right? Because even if it's only the manager thinking this way, again, it's going to be limited what they can
right.
influence, right? But if everybody on the team is thinking and connecting daily their priorities to outcomes and in alignment with the team, that's where you get the magic. Well, the velocity puck going up, and then the outcome making really meaningful. Sorry, I guess I say puck. I meant the stick. The hockey, the stick, the velocity going up,
Yeah.
and then really delivering meaningful business results, and then that obviously translates into growth, and everybody is then happy. Like that's
Yes.
the crux of the whole thing, right? So yeah, I totally agree with that. Have you seen what are some of the biggest misconceptions that technical leaders might have about what it takes to transition from being a great engineer to being an effective team leader? Just if you can help some people just, see What is it that we're misfiring on sometimes from this position?
Yeah, I would say, I think probably just maybe a little bit of it is how people expect the dynamic to change or
Mm.
aren't quite, I feel like a lot of times when people transition to a leadership role, it's not awkward because like there's any tension. It's kind of awkward because the person feels like there might be tension and
Right, right, right.
doing all these like, gymnastics to kind of get around it when it's just probably not there in the
Right.
beginning. So I'm not sure exactly how to phrase that, but I think you get I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the other thing I think is what I've seen is people don't necessarily want to feel like all these decisions just are on them and them only. At least for me and like the
Yeah.
managers or leaders that are under me, that that's never the case. But I
Yeah,
have
it's not
seen
true.
that, yeah,
Yes.
I have seen that hesitation of like when there's a
Yeah,
conversation and I might want to get an opinion, and it's like, I can tell they're giving me an opinion that's really not really what they think. And so, I just try and force like, hey, you won't be making the decision here. Like, but I do need your actual opinion to like
right.
inform what we're gonna do.
Nice.
And so just, again, being supportive in that way and just letting them know, it's not all on you. But
Yeah,
I think a lot of it will come down to that. And then I guess just that transition, I guess I would say a misconception would be, at least with me, but again, this won't be everywhere, is that you have to give up development or,
right.
coding
Yeah, yeah,
altogether.
yeah,
And I think, there's a lot of places where that's not the case. And so
yeah.
if you
Agreed.
are interested, there is usually a pathway where you can do
Both.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love your I think I totally know what you mean. I didn't wanna just jump in, but to me, it comes back to just, like, we're still people working with people, right? There's not
Right.
some magical, like, secret door you get, like, let in behind the
Yeah.
scenes, like, you're a manager now and you have to make all the choices. Like, no, we're still people working together. We're still making decisions together, thinking critically. It's just that your leadership wise, you are responsible for different scope of outcomes. And,
Yes.
I totally, to me, all of this always kind of brings down to there's a little bit of, systemically lack of clarity on some of these jumps that are happening. We as people are filling in the blanks, right? From wherever you
Right.
are at. So you're like, oh, I'm scared of this, I'm scared of that. And just like you were saying, half the time it's not even reality, right? It's just what you're thinking about. It's the perception of it that's setting
Right.
up the gap, actually. It's not a real gap.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah, but
agree.
perception is reality. We get a little philosophical.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. I was going to ask you a little bit about where role data plays. I'm always very interested on this in general because I know, again, traditionally for leadership and performance development, traditional approach is to use the gut. Select people that you are kind of like, select people. But the more we know about this, any kind of gut-based selection is baking in bias for either people that we like or extroverted people or something like that, right? There's
Right.
just like a bias baked in. So I'm really enjoying asking leaders about how we can use data to help us navigate away from that, the biased view. And I know you already brought up a little bit using the throughput and in context with some conversations, but I just want to ask again, just if there's any other data. Obviously, you're very driven using data. If there's any other data that you like to use for driving some leadership effectiveness on your engineering teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, there's tons of data. We look at a lot of the like door metrics overall. So like, how are our releases?
Hmm.
Are we releasing often? Are we putting out good releases? How often are we
Hmm.
rolling back? And we do look at just like throughput as a team mostly, and velocity as a team. And
Hmm.
so that can tell us again where we know we have those situations where if we are putting somebody into that role where they're testing things out, we expect, those numbers will come down and come back up. Or if we're bringing new people on the team, we would expect, hey, onboarding, there's going to be more questions, more handholding, but then we
Yeah.
expect to see, like, hey, we should have more velocity and throughput than we had before we hired this new person. And then if not, after, a certain amount of time, then let's look deeply to see what's going on. All those things, like you said earlier, you do have to have the context of because there could be a team that's working on just a really large feature. And so, like, those numbers are going to go in every sprint in the same way. And so, you're going to have a dip and then you'll have it jump back up. And so, we're looking at averages over time. But, when you're looking at moments in time and trying to see if something's
Yeah.
effective, you have to make sure you have the context too by talking to people. I would say, yeah, those are the types of data we're looking at
Yeah.
specifically for the engineering team. I think it's good too to have data on the work that you put out. Now, that's not really up to the engineering team to
Yeah. Yeah.
do, but you do wanna have measurement. Hey, was whatever we did that was highest priority, was it as effective as we thought?
Yeah.
And to help us make decisions, later on and how we A/B test or how we experiment,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so, yeah, data played a really important part in
Agreed.
those aspects and even greater aspects, but those
Yeah.
that directly affect the engineering team.
That's great. And I really, and of course, we know theoretically, we know that. And the way you're talking, you can't just look at velocity, you have to look at quality and all. There's so many the dimensions of data. I always think it's great. We know these things, but it's great to hear them from a leader who's actually doing them. Because there's also sometimes we think, oh, that's just theory. It doesn't
Right.
actually work in practice, right? But you're proof that it does. But
Yeah.
again, also you're highlighting need context, need still the human touch, which I also love to highlight even as a technology. I hope the human part is never going away.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
like,
Definitely.
even if you get better at data and all of this and measurements and KPIs and everything, we're still people. I like to come back
Yeah.
to that, and sounds like you do too. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Ivan, I so much enjoyed getting your thoughts, right from the front lines, as a very obviously very intentional leader. So I like to ask my guests, I like to give them a magic wand at the end of our conversations now that we're all warmed up. And in the spirit of prioritization, which I also think is a critical key to success, if you were talking to an engineer moving into their first time team role, you know, what do you, and I know it's not even theoretical for you because you have this, or like, what would you list as like the core components for their success?
Yeah. I would go back to communication, I think, is going to be the top one. And that's going to be how you communicate with your team. That's going to be how you communicate with the leadership team that's either above you or that you're a part of.
Mhm.
And just making sure you're giving the right information to your team so that they can
Yeah,
work effectively. I think collaboration is going to be really important too, which hopefully you already have that being on the engineering team.
that's
So
right.
even if it's working with other engineers or design or product, but you'll have to be able to collaborate with the other business units again on figuring out the best priority, probably on de-scoping some of the work that they want you to do
Yeah.
and making sure that it's appropriate for, timelines and all of that. So just being able to do those things. And then I would say, the other thing I would say is you want to I would say, there's gonna be, especially when you first become a manager, I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I've gotta really show that I can perform at a high level. And that
Right.
puts you at risk of accepting just kinda crazy
Um,
timelines, crazy feature
right.
requests, burning out the team, and so think of yourself, if I was an engineer on this team, would I wanna do
Right.
this thing or, how would I respond to this? And, it's gonna be different than maybe how you handle it as a leader,
Yeah.
but I think you wanna always consider the impact on your team and make sure that you're protecting them from burnout, from too tight deadlines, from scope creep, all those things. You wanna think about yourself as protecting the team from everything you wish you were protected from, you
Well,
know?
and I love that because it's actually comes right back. That's your secret power, right?
Right.
That's actually why the technical leader is going to actually be successful, is that
Exactly.
you deeply understand what that feels like. Like I
Yeah.
remember, sorry, silly example, but being like a part of the executive team, I always asking people asking for resolution of buttons. I deeply remember, of course, as a high level leader, you have to talk in business terms about issues fixing. But it served me so well to deeply remember as an individual contributor being time crunched to fix a bug, like, the feeling of that and giving estimates
Right.
out, right? So of course you have to figure that out, but but it serves you. It's actually a power you have that you deeply understand how that person is feeling and then can help them, uh, you know, whatever, report up properly or create space for the solution that's needed. So it's actually like, it's not a shortcoming. It's actually a power you have that
Yeah,
use.
definitely.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
love
I
how
agree.
you, yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much, Ivan, for sharing your thoughts. I am certain that there is technical team members and leaders that will benefit from all of your practical experience that you shared with us today. Thank you so much for your time.
But thank you again for having me. It was a great
Absolutely.
conversation. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.